everybody, your favorite professor here. Ultra protected. Don't worry. Staying safe. Staying cool. Feels a little better though. So today we're going to talk about and finish up the aging body and mind. And by the end of this lecture, you should be able to get a great sense of why the body and mind age and how we could potentially adapt to that. Here's a little message from the dude. Don't worry about getting old. We're still going to do dumb stuff, only slower. Wanted to give a shout out to Jay Cuts in Reseda. Thanks, Jay, for keeping me looking fresh to death.
Yeah, buddy.
Today we're gonna finish up the aging body and mind. Specifically, we're gonna get at the mechanisms and the theories behind why the body and the mind age. And we talked a lot about the body during the live lecture, and we're gonna get really more into the mind. You know, these cognitive declines, Alzheimer's disease. These are the hallmarks of what a lot of people think about when we go through the aging process. So like we said before, most people in these developing nations make it into older adulthood. 2/3 in the United States, right? And this presents a issue that people are just not dying all of a sudden. They're dying because of chronic illnesses, things that kill us softly. Shout out to the Fugees. They'll never come back. But so modern medicine has really made this possible, you know, toward the end of life. It allows us to just live longer and healthier in these later ages. But this is also the dilemma we see, that most people now, they start to suffer from these chronic illnesses, these chronic diseases. And there's pills, you know, to control your cholesterol, hypertension, your heart stuff, all this stuff. There's all these pills. No shout out to Big Pharma. They're taking all the money. But essentially, this advent of modern medicine, right? The good and the bad of it, right? Has led to so many people being in this later life than ever in the history of history.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
And here is a good example that we keep going to, right? These are statistics from the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, of what are the top 10 reasons of how people die. And we do see here that heart disease is the #1 killer, along with, we reviewed last time, these malign neoplasms of, essentially this is cancer, along with these respiratory and Alzheimer's disease as these top 10 killers. And these are chronic, right? These are chronic disorders or diseases that kill us gradually, right? They're chronic, not like Dr. Dre chronic, but chronic. Like they last a while, you know. They're just not acute. They don't just happen all of a sudden.
Alrighty then.
And like we discussed before, you know, this built-in senescence, right? This dying process is part of all species, all animals, everything, all parts of life, right? This dying process that's programmed into our genetics. However, we also discussed that dilemma of living forever. And living forever would be terrible because you would have to not only deal with your mother and the grandmother telling you how to raise your kids, but your grandmother's mother and the mother. Imagine having to get all that parental advice or putting on a jacket from these multiple generations. Death is a natural part of this whole living cycle. But when things do not die, right? that becomes an issue in general because resources are limited. And when resources are limited, the more people alive, the more things alive, the more resources they command and they suck up. But one really, really big innovation that is really overlooked is Henrietta Lacks's contribution to medicine. You know, we talked about how modern medicine really extends our life. However, Henrietta Lacks, right? The reason why we have the polio vaccine and all these different vaccines is because of something called HELA cells. These are immortal cells that keep living forever and keep replicating forever and ever. And for some reason, we still don't know, they define this Hayflick limit in terms of degrading. They just continuously replicate and replicate and replicate and take over. And this is really important for science because it provides this controlled environment to do these experiments, test these vaccines. So here is a little clip of what HELA is.
Imagine something small enough to float on a particle of dust that holds the keys to understanding cancer, virology, and genetics. Luckily for us, such a thing exists in the form of trillions upon trillions of human lab-grown cells called HELA. Let's take a step back for a second. Scientists grow human cells in the lab to study how they function, understand how diseases develop, and test new treatments without endangering patients. To make sure that they can repeat these experiments over and over and compare the results with other scientists, they need huge populations of identical cells that can duplicate themselves faithfully for years. But until 1951, all human cell lines that researchers tried to grow had died after a few days. Then a Johns Hopkins scientist named George Guy received a sample of a strange-looking tumor. Dark purple, shiny, jelly-like. This sample was special. Some of its cells just kept dividing and dividing and dividing. When individual cells died, generations of copies took their place and thrived. The result was an endless source of identical cells that's still around today, the very first immortal human cell line. Guy labeled it HELA after the patient with the unusual tumor, Henrietta Lacks. Born on a tobacco farm in Virginia, she lived in Baltimore with her husband and 5 children. She died of aggressive cervical cancer a few months after her tumor's cells were harvested, and she never knew about them. So what's so special about the cells from Henrietta Lacks that lets them survive when other cell lines die? The short answer is, we don't entirely know. Normal human cells have built-in control mechanisms. They can divide about 50 times before they self-destruct in a process called apoptosis. This prevents the propagation of genetic errors that creep in after repeated rounds of division. But cancer cells ignore these signals, dividing indefinitely and crowding out normal cells. Still, most cell lines eventually die off, especially outside the human body. Not HELA, though, and that's the part we can't yet explain. Regardless, when Dr. Guy realized he had the first immortal line of human cells, he sent samples to labs all over the world. Soon the world's first cell production facility was churning out 6 trillion HELA cells a week. And scientists put them to work, in an ethically problematic way, building careers and fortunes off of Henrietta's cells without her or her family's consent, or even knowledge until decades later. The polio epidemic was at its peak in the early 50s. HELA cells, which easily took up and replicated the virus, allowed Jonas Salk to test his vaccine. They've been used to study diseases including measles, mumps, HIV, and Ebola. We know that human cells have 46 chromosomes because a scientist working with HELA discovered a chemical that makes chromosomes visible. HELA cells themselves actually have around 80 highly mutated chromosomes. HELA cells were the first to be cloned. They've traveled to outer space. Telomerase, an enzyme that helps cancer cells evade destruction by repairing their DNA, was discovered first in HELA cells. In an interesting turn of fate, thanks to HELA, We know that cervical cancer can be caused by a virus called HPV, and now there's a vaccine. HELA-fueled discoveries have filled thousands of scientific papers, and that number is probably even higher than anyone knows. HELA cells are so resilient that they can travel on almost any surface. A lab worker's hand, a piece of dust, invading cultures of other cells and taking over like weeds. Countless cures, patents, and discoveries, all made thanks to Henrietta Lacks.
And I would encourage you all to watch Oprah. Shout out to Oprah again. I don't need a new car, Oprah, but shout out to you. Maybe one of my students does, but she created a great film about Henrietta Lacks. So I would encourage a lot of you to watch that as well, to get more into that story. But we know there is not just a biological explanation of why we age. There is no single theory like we talked about before. It's really a combination of genetics, the environment, and behavior. So it's a combination, right, of all these three pieces of genetics, the environment, and then your behavior. We also discussed the blue zone, right? Even though the Loma Linda, right, has the worst air possible, right, in the Inland Empire, the IE, I see a lot of you guys cringe already because you guys are smug LA people. They still live long, healthy lives because of these behaviors that they do, you know, because they abstain from alcohol, they exercise regularly, they engage in community with their Seventh-day Adventistness, right, their religion. They produce generations of people who maybe have better genetics, right? So these go back and forth with each other. But there is no one single theory of why some people age well or don't age well, their bodies and minds. There's all these factors that come into play. And these factors could also, there's also a factor of chance, right? That the like freak accidents, you know, or COVID, right? Just think about now, or in the future students watching this, think about there was a COVID global pandemic, right, of the coronavirus back in 2009 to 2020 that put everything offline, but then started all of this. This is just a little thing for you guys in the future. Hey, future Thomas. Hey, future professor. Hi, future students.
Oh, that's awkward.
So, regardless of all of this, we have to really figure out, right, all these factors come into play to extend life. We really have that ethical question. What is more important, right? Do we just want to add years to life? Or do we want to add more life to years, right? This is the classic George Valens, who is a famous gerontologist, about, like, it's not about just the quantity of life, right? It's about the quality of life that we provide. And we also talked a little bit about compression or morbidity, right? Extending that time when people are more active and have a better quality of life, right? So decreasing that disability, the time in disability, and increasing the health span. So that is that whole concept of the, oh, you can't even see. So, and in increasing the health span, you know, so this is that whole quality versus quantity. So for you, yes, you, the students out there, I want you to just give a little discussion. If you could live to whatever age you wanted, what would the age you would want to live? And how much part of that age would you want to be healthy, right? Of being able to do what you want to do. I'm sure actually it could be probably all that. But what age would you want to live at? Live to. So when we talk about why does the body grow old, the classic wear and tear theory really comes into play. And you can think about it as a car, right? That's actually my first real car that I had that I owned. That's a 2002 Mitsubishi Galant. I don't even know if they make them anymore, but think of a car, right? It's all new, it's brand new, and it drives fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But after a while, through these bumps and these little things that happen to it, these dings and just general wear and tear, that things start to break down, and these breakdowns start to build up, and your car starts to be more susceptible to general things happening and going wrong. And you can think about this theory really thinks about the human body like that, you know. After a while, right, as we get mileage, literally people like literally say you get more mileage out of this person, you are more likely to break down. You know, you think also about this with NFL running backs, right? The more mileage they have on them, the more likely they are prone to injury or prone for something happening to them. Shout out to Brett and Ben. Then we also get at this somatic mutation theory that really postulates that because of cell division, right, and replicates, as we age and keep going down the lifespan, right, cells naturally, they just splits, and as you grow, there's more and more splits down the line. These splits, you start to have more error in them. And these errors are caused by a multitude of things. It could be from the environment, it could be it's already part of the genome built into the code. Just because, like, when you make a copy of a copy and a copy of that, it starts to deprecate in its quality. Same thing along this theory. And there are many things that cause this error, you know, such as the maybe lifestyle activities, diets, like caloric intake, like we discussed a little bit about. Your DNA can have these errors built in as you age, and also external forces, the environment, right? Maybe you're out in the sun too long, you know, that's causing more of these errors. And those would cause interruptions to this replication process. And the last predominant theory is this accumulative waste theory. Essentially, our body is always cycling waste in and out of our cells. But when things start to build up, like a bottleneck, because our bodies are less efficient at removing it, these harmful substances start to build up and build up and build up, and they cause more errors, they cause more dysfunction in our bodies. And this dysfunction means we can't keep up with the waste coming in, and we can't clear it fast enough. You can think about this as like a house, right? There's things that go wrong with an old house. There's a leaky roof, then the floors start falling down, and then the door handle comes off. So these things start to build up faster than you can repair them. So that's the issue with as you age, right? Just think about, you can't repair them fast enough as you age because it's harder to get to the roof, harder to get to the floor, harder to get to the door. And lastly, these two other theories about autoimmune theory, essentially this is saying that because over time, right, there are more and more defects, the body can't distinguish itself from what is its own tissues from its foreign tissues, and it starts to attack itself, you know, starts to reject itself. And lastly, that aging is just programmed. You know, we have this genetic lifespan really programmed into us that we're trying to extend with these gene editings and CRISPR stuff. And this is all programmed. Just think about how mice, right? Mice and rats, right? They have a specific time lifespan, such as 2 to 3 years. And in the wild, they're about like 1 year, but they don't live 50 years. You know, that is genetically programmed in them. Just like these flies, right? What are those flies? Fruit flies, right? They last really short, right? They have little life cycles. This is why this is one of the favorites of biologists to test these out, because then they could breed generations and generations and generations of fruit flies, but you don't see them extending to 200 years old. So humans right now, and we talked about before when we talked about the lifespan, they only go to about 120 right now. Jean Clement, right, was the oldest lady, controversy. But we don't see them going to 150 or 200. At least there's no real empirical evidence. But with this gene editing and all this stuff we talked about with the telomeres, maybe this might happen, right? Because we're changing the genetics part, right? Because if it's genes, environments, and behavior, you know, there's only so much we can do with this and this. It's really this that's going to be the holy grail to push life span. Companies, right? The companies really prey upon this, you know, that, oh man, we don't want to age. You know, when we age, all these things break down, especially physically and biologically, and we don't want that. So companies really prey upon this. And here's a little great clip by the Wall Street Journal about that, you know, that industry, that $4 trillion+ industry of anti-aging and the psychology behind what they prey upon.
It's no secret that Americans have never embraced getting older, but with the anti-aging industry raking in over $261 billion in the past year alone, there's never been a better time to get smart about what you're putting in your medicine cabinet and on your body. Joining us now with 5 things the anti-aging industry won't tell you is Market Watch retirement and healthcare specialist Elizabeth O'Brien. Now, one of the things they won't tell you is that they profit from your insecurities, right? So if you think your skin's not just right, they're going to play off that. They're not going to tell you, oh, it's fine. They're going to say, oh yeah, that's something we can fix.
Exactly. They're definitely, people are in this country in particular, we're not kind to older people, and we make the marketing is good at fueling people's perception that it's their fault if they've gotten older, and it's their fault. But hey, there's a fix, you know.
And some of the doctors that you see aren't always really specialists in their field. I'm thinking of things that are injected into one's face and stuff.
Yeah. Anti-aging is a growing specialty in medicine. Some prefer to call it age management. But doctors from all specialties can call themselves an anti-aging specialist. There are burned out ER doctors who are gravitating toward the practice, and they might not have any specialized training in fields, for example, like endocrinology, for the prescribing of hormones. They might not have any specialized training in the things that they're prescribing.
And that actually feeds into the next one that you find out, the lack of regulation in this industry. I mean, I could go and do something like this, perhaps, you know, in terms of giving out treatment, right?
Yeah, there are. It's illegal to buy one without a prescription, but there are ways to online to do that, absolutely. And it is disturbing. Well, the one reason why the FDA doesn't regulate these compounded bioidentical hormones, that's the kind that are custom mixed in a lab, is because each prescription is different. They're kind of mixed from raw ingredients in a pharmacy, and it goes, you know, each person gets a custom dose. But people, they don't carry the same warning labels that traditional drugs do. And people might think that means they're not, you know, there's no problem.
So what I love about it, you say the marketing chops exceed the scientific chops. I think that, I mean, that seems to something. I also heard someone say something similar to this many years ago. We manufacture cosmetics, we sell hope.
Exactly, hope in a jar. That's certainly. The cosmetics are not drugs. They're not overseen by the FDA in terms of before they go to market. So the FDA is not looking at whether the wrinkle cream will actually reduce your wrinkles by 50%. Before it goes on to market. If there are safety concerns about something, the FDA might look at it afterward. But, you know, cosmetic companies are very good at packaging. They put cream in a sumptuous box. They create a wonderful narrative about their secret ingredient, their special ingredient that's going to turn back time. And it's largely, you know, the science is not there to support their claims oftentimes.
Now, maybe people should sort of get with the idea that you can look better if you eat better, cut the bad habits,
absolutely,
smoking, excessive drinking, and do a bit of exercise. I mean, wouldn't that be? I mean, I know that's sort of crazy idea in this instant sort of, I want everything instant, but you know, walk to work instead of taking the car, whatever it is.
Well, that's the way to go. There is no fountain of youth. There is no quick fix. I mean, Americans, we love our instant gratification, but really, doctors say that the best things you can do to look and feel good as you get older are exactly that. Exercise regularly and eat well, stay out of the sun and use sunblock when you're in the sun, don't smoke. You know, these are basic things and they're free. So
and broccoli's cheap is all I will say.
There you go.
It won't be strong tasting, but it is cheap. Thank you very much. You've got that story on Market Watch and 5 more things that you probably don't know about the anti-aging industry.
You see, that's part of the psychology that people are preying upon, especially with this anti-aging society, and there's more an incentive for them to do that because guess what? Cash money. It's a big industry. So your job, right? The goal of this class is to really get you to really parse out what is beyond if it's scientifically shown or suggested or there's a lot of evidence. What is the motivation behind what's trying to be sold to you? You know, and how do you parse that out? Whether you're being sold something based on science, either sound or not sound science. So that's really that incentive is what you really got to be careful and watch out for. So one thing I want you as a class to really discuss is what is that? We're seeing that video. How are ways that you are or your loved ones are affected by this anti-aging industry? Because there's such a big incentive, $4 trillion and plus, of course, there's going to be all these facts or information you're fed on. And so just discuss, hey, what are some things that you see that they're preying upon? And one thing to break down, right, which is really highlighted to be part of the aging body are these wrinkles, right? And why wrinkles happen. And I'll link a description of a better, more informed biological basis of it. But there are 4 reasons, right, why people develop wrinkles. First one is just age, right? Essentially your epidermis, right? You have an epidermis area, but then there's these elastic areas on the bottom, right? They get less elastic with age, and that's just part of the biology of the aging skin. And so this would be a bigger thing called like skin aging. And the second one would be these repeated facial expressions, right? Over time, if you think about over time, we smile, we get crusty, you frown, you get these like little wrinkle thingies, you know? So with that repeatedness, right, you start to make like an impression, you know, on your face. And things that really also highlights these external exposures is obviously there's sun damage, right? The sun really messes up the DNA of skin and causes that damage, along with smoke. I'll put a description of a little more about skin aging and the biology about that. But essentially, this is the first thing that you see, right, as somebody who's old and their appearance. And this culture is obsessed with getting anti-wrinkles with the Botox and stopping that and putting on sunscreen and using those umbrellas to block the sun. But these wrinkles, right, are really part of the aging process that we are obsessed with getting rid of because they are the first sign of aging. And how do we deal with the aging body, right? Because aging is not a disease, right? It's an actual biological process that happens, right? That's built into our programming. There are just things that happen to us, so we're more prone to certain things as we age, but it's not necessarily a disease, because it would be weird, right, if it didn't occur. You know, think about Benjamin Button, how weird that'd be. Or imagine you're stuck in time, you know, and never aged. That would be just strange, right? And that would throw all of order out of whack. Like Benjamin Button, right? Reverse aging. So aging is not a disease. There's just a lot of things that come along with aging that make you more prone to disease, disability, and decrease in functioning. And as of 2020, it is unavoidable. But I would imagine in the future that we'll have some genetic interventions, you know, especially nowadays. They are saving people's stem cells, you know, while they're born to potentially combat some of these aging or disabilities that we experience with aging. So we don't know, but it is right now unavoidable, and it's going to be unavoidable because it's just part of the process. But we're doing a lot of this editing, potentially, I don't know, good or bad, right? Playing that role of editing the genes, but it's unavoidable. And one way psychologically, right, which we can just deal with this unavoidableness is this selection, optimization, and compensation, right? How do we engage in the activities that we value, but then to compensate for a loss? You know, like we always talk about, like athletes, right? Basketball players, right? In the beginning, they're all young and vibrant and are able to dunk and do all these athletic things, but then after a while, their body starts getting old, even the 30s, and they start to change. You know, they start to focus more on maybe jump shot as opposed to being a dunker. And then even after playing the days, they become coaches or commentary. They find other ways to be involved in this meaningful activity that is a sport for them. So that's that selection, optimization, and compensation. Psychologically, this is how we really deal with loss of functioning of the aging body.
Brains.
Okay, now switching to the mind, right? We know that there are natural cognitive declines that happen during the aging process, especially with this processing speed. You know, it takes a little longer for you to get things, you know, compared to when you are young. So this is when you you lose your sharpness, you know, your sharpness starts to dull. Even though you can get it, it just takes a little longer to process. This is what we call the processing speed that declines. But we see over time, all of this, right, most of the cognitive functions decline with age, except for vocabulary necessarily, right? And there's a lot of development, you know, because we're editing all these things and trying to intervene at this biological genetic level. We're trying to find this cure, right, for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, which really trying to intervene at this plaques and tangles level with that. And a lot of the stuff that's been shown and been promising to combat these buildups, essentially, right? These buildups of what's tau and beta amyloid. We're trying to intervene on that, and we're showing that in animal models, at least, we can intervene on that, but it still doesn't prevent it, you know, from these cognitive declines that we are showing in humans especially. But that means that there's this big race, you know, to actually find this quote-unquote cure for Alzheimer's disease. And so this is going to be a big charge of just in general these next couple of decades, because it affects so many people. This editing will also be part of improving cognitive functioning. You ever try to teach older adults technologies, like me trying to teach my mom and dad who just got a new iPhone, the whole iOS interface? That's like, trying to do it from a distance too. It's almost impossible. But there is a big misconception that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? An old person new tricks. There's neuroplasticity throughout the lifespan. People could learn anything essentially throughout their life, right? Because the brain is still shaping even into older ages. So this myth of you can't teach somebody that's older new things is wrong. And what's being sold to you, right? Yes, you are these like things like fish oils and things to sharpen your brain, you know, to keep you from declining and keep your memory sharp. They're still really tough to really show that these really improve general cognition. You know, they far transfer, especially these games. You know, people play these games and they don't really what's called far transfer. You know, go extend beyond getting better at the game. And what really is highlighted when we decline with age is this fluid intelligence, that sharpness, right? That ability to think abstractly and solve a problem, right? This usually involves a novel environment. You know, you're thrown into a situation, okay, solve it or figure it out. This is when there's all these processes, these come into play, right? The processing speed, the ability to access working memory, to be able to solve a question or solve an issue in a novel situation. So this is this fluid intelligence, right? That ability that gets declined with age. In contrary, it's beyond just fluid intelligence, right? Because we know it's not just about novel environments and navigating them and solving those issues. It's about just navigating your environment in general. So what actually goes up with age is this crystallized intelligence, right? This is what you use your knowledge that you have gained, right? You use your experience to actually function better, you know, solve issues and solve problems. We see this in sports with crafty veterans, you know, they've seen it all and done it all, and they just play smarter and not harder, right? So this crystallized intelligence, it grows with age, as opposed to this fluid intelligence, it declines with age. So this is a big controversy in the field, you know. Can we intervene on this fluid intelligence, right? More of these dynamic processes, these capacities of functioning of fluid intelligence. And there's some strategy. Are there these strategies like crossword puzzles or doing Sudoku or playing these games like Luminosity to actually sharpen cognition? There's a lot of mixed research on these mind games, you know. Do they actually work to improve your general functioning cognitively, right? Are you able to function better after playing these games? And the big answer is just like anti-aging for the body, right? They're throwing all this stuff at you. There's money to be made, you know, to keeping sharp, you know, mentally with it, and they sell you these games, these activities that may or may not promote cognition. Well, actually, in the case of Luminosity, right, they took this like promising science, this mixed evidence of science about playing games, and trying to charge people money for playing them. And their claims were like, oh, play these games and you improve cognition, you know, you improve your brain functioning. However, their claims didn't far transfer, right? This is the holy grail, right? Being able to intervene on this fluid intelligence or memory, right? It didn't do that, right? People only got better at the games. They never really got better in terms of generally, right? Their general memory, right? They just got better at the games. And they were actually sued for millions of dollars for these false claims, even though there was a ton of reputable scientists that backed it. They, because it was commercialized, really spun it way too much and made these claims, these outrageous claims, and these claims really got them into trouble. So same parallel with the aging process, you know, do these things to promote the body imaging. There is a lot of money to be made from these people preying upon the declining mind and brain. But we shouldn't disregard all of this evidence of these enriching activities and these games on mental functioning, because there is mixed evidence. There's just people like Luminosity that really blew it out of proportion. And one of the best empirical evidence that we see is at UCSF with Adam Gasly's work on nerves. Here's a little clip about that.
Well, what we found was that a group of older adults who played a video game that we custom designed to train a deficit that we know that population has in their ability to deal with interference, which is distraction and multitasking, and in general cognitive control abilities. We found that by playing the game repetitively over a period of time, that we were able to improve how they played the game in terms of multitasking on the game, but also other abilities that we didn't train directly, like their sustained attention and their working memory.
So we made a game that involved playing it for a set amount of time that had adaptivity, so it got harder as you got better. And we thought that if we challenged people's abilities in an interference-laden place where it was really complicated and busy, it would help drive their brain to adapt in a way that would have helped them in other areas.
It shows what a lot of us have been learning and we believe is that the older brain is still plastic. That plasticity, this ability of our brain to reshape itself in response to a stimulus from the environment, doesn't end at a critical period of development, but continues throughout our life. So if we just know how to target it and channel it directly, then we can get very large effects. But the type of training that people might think is helpful, like playing a crossword puzzle and other types of games that don't really push these abilities at a very fundamental level, might not have as much of an effect. So it really depends what you're doing. Not everything that you do will be equally good for your brain or for the rest of your body, for that matter.
Well, it's the basic universal truth that people, they start to decline with age, right? But that's not necessarily true in all professions. What is intelligence, right? That's really a bigger question of how that is measured. Is it this general intelligence, right? This big G factor, or is it like Howard Gardner would say, like multiple intelligence, right? There's a social intelligence, we know that, right? There's some people that have very little social intelligence, but they might be really intelligent otherwise, right? So there's social intelligence and music intelligence. There's a 7 intelligence according to Howard Gardner, but there's in general, and when we talk about intelligence, talk about general intelligence. So this fluid intelligence, and there's few people that show these this global declines, because like Einstein, right, he actually got what we call more intelligent with age, but in general this is a general trend, right? Because we could always think of these counterfactual people who don't conform, but this is a general trend that cognition declines with age. So cognitive reserve, right, this is one of the most fascinating So one of the most fascinating things that we could do to maintain function, right? Just like Einstein might have done, maintain functioning, especially his mental functioning, is building these cognitive reserve capacities. And building these cognitive reserves essentially allows people to function longer, right? Through these enriching activities. This is one of the proposed mechanisms by which we propose that why people keep functioning even despite there's pathology here is these built up cognitive reserves, right? They build these side roads, like I keep saying, these side roads to maintain functioning even though maybe this main road is blocked, right? And you do this through engaging in these enriching activities. And engaging in these enriching activities really allows somebody to function longer. And there's a lot of support of this, especially with the Nun study and all these other studies, that education is one major pathway of building these cognitive reserves. If you think about like all the things that you do, you know, when you are in college or when you just get in general more education, there's all these enriching activities, a variety of enriching activities, some might say. Shout out to Kyle Moore. And these enriching activities really promote, right, these building of these alternate ways to function. So as we saw in the Nun study, even despite, right, there's actual pathology here, there's actual blockage of this pathway that they see in essentially in these nuns, that there is pathology here. They were never diagnosed with cognitive decline or Alzheimer's disease because they were still able to function, right? They were never clinically diagnosed, even though when we dissected their brains in the autopsy, they had the pathology there. So there's, beyond education, there's all these other enriching activities proposed to do that. We just don't know right now. This is an exciting new realm of research on, like, does language, learning a second language promote that? Learning music. There's all these different pathways that we don't know of experiences. This is that behavioral part of the equation of understanding cognitive decline. It's really fascinating. You'll see more and more of that through this decade as we try to understand and prevent and intervene on how do we promote cognitive functioning, you know, later in life, you know, extending that quality of life with extending cognitive. So a lot of the questions that get involved, right, in cognitive decline is what is normal compared to what is abnormal, right? What is pathology or disorder? So it's all about maladaptation, right? Because Alzheimer's disease currently, right, it has to be clinically diagnosed. Even though we're coming up with these biomarkers with to try and diagnose it, right now it has to be clinically diagnosed. And this clinical diagnosis has to really deal with are you still able to function? You know, if people build up their cognitive reserve or are still able to function, then they are not diagnosed with the disease, you know, if they're able to still function, right? It's all about functioning, right? And even though despite having these plaques and tangles that only can be really identified reliably when a person dies, right, and dissecting their brain. Right now, we're coming up with this spinal fluid stuff or MRI, special fMRIs to really target that. But right now, the only real way to do it is clinically. And it really evolves around whether these dysfunctions or these declines in cognition really affect you, such as you maybe lose your keys, but what if you just always lose your keys all the time and it's becoming maladaptive, or you don't even know where you are, or making these bad decisions. Sometimes we all make bad decisions. Talking about you. Yes, you. Okay. But what about all the time, right? When we say somebody's doing something all the time, there's something chronic, right? It's this chronicness that leads to maladaptation is the key. And we think of missing a payment, which is fine, but always missing a payment and not even know where the bills are. So these are hallmarks of somebody not being able to manage their life, you know, not being able to engage in these activities of daily living or instrumental activities of daily living, right? IADLs and ADLs. So not being able to function, right, and engage in these normal behaviors is these are the warning signs of whether something is normal aging versus maladaptive aging. Part of what is so fascinating about this cognitive reserve is this ability, right, to modify certain functioning, right, continue functioning longer. Just like we said, It's your genes times your environment times your behaviors, right? So this cognitive reserve, right? If you think about it, this is Jakob Stern's kind of theory, and his work. Think of it as like a bank, right? Reserves, right? You have these capacities, right? If you have more of that, if you have more capacities, right? You function longer. You see this line? You are able to function longer, and it takes longer to decline, right? This is age and pathology, but you start to see the decline starts to be sharper when you are have high cognitive reserve, because you are lasting longer and longer and longer until pathology overwhelms the person. You start to develop, let's just say, AD, right? Alzheimer's disease over here, as opposed to somebody who has low reserve would be diagnosed a lot earlier. So you're able to function longer. Like I said, this is still Alzheimer's disease, especially, is a pathology, right? We think about this leading to dementia. And dementia essentially is this bigger umbrella term of a syndrome of mental impairments. You're not able memory impairments, lack of ability to function, because many things could cause somebody to experience dementia, such as Alzheimer's being the number one in aging, but traumatic brain injuries also could cause dementia. There's also other disorders that could cause dementias, Parkinson's disease, Lewy body disease, right? All these things could cause dementia. However, we really just highlight Alzheimer's disease, but they are different, right? Dementia is this bigger umbrella. Think about like depression. There's many roots to somebody being depressed, right? It could be traumatic experience, it could be genetics. There's all these roots or routes, whatever, to experiencing dementia. But so being able to continue functioning, right, longer is this key of cognitive reserve, right? And it's exciting because it's these enriching behaviors that we can engage in to extend that period. So in general, right, if you have more in the bank, right, when something goes wrong, you're able to last longer, right? You're able to last even longer if like an expense comes, a crisis comes. So that's why you can think of reserve as like a bank. And your favorite professor, has published a couple articles on enriching activities and how they relate to cognitive functioning. I will give you a link to those on Canvas. Especially now, what I'm doing here at CSUN with these augmented reality applications we are developing and researching. Shout out to the Party Lab. When we talk about creativity and the brain, we really talk about productivity, and essentially different fields value productivity differently. So as people grow older, especially as academics, they are more likely to publish more in this thing compared to when they are younger in the art fields, right? You see in the arts, and they start to peak more in their 40s. So there's the decline, right? It's really subjective to the field of what is productive in somebody's field. And kind of building upon crystallized intelligence, right? We think about wisdom, wisdom and the ability to essentially navigate your environment is this wisdom, right? How do we function and navigate in our environment based on these past experiences, using this knowledge to really drive behavior and functioning in the world. And this is a picture of Gandalf, right? And being able to derive that knowledge and gather that knowledge and leverage it is what we would call wisdom. And when you accrue wisdom, you accrue it throughout ages, right? You accrue it throughout experiences. And when we think of crafty veterans, right? We literally they call them crafty veterans in sports. This is that wisdom, right? They're using these experiences that they've seen, putting it together and using it for the current circumstances. This is me trying to box out and do basketball moves on the screen. I'll stop that. know in the research, right, it's really about, well, wisdom is not just necessarily for older ages. This develops, right? This use of this experience just doesn't happen at later ages. It happens at all ages, right? It really depends on the gathering and usage of that. So you could develop wisdom at any age. You're welcome. And the last thing we're really going to get into is Alzheimer's a little more, right? It's Alzheimer's disease is literally these pathologies, right? These plaques and tangles that occur that really affect the functioning of a brain. And here you see the difference between a regular healthy brain and an Alzheimer's brain, right? You see that the brain is shrunk, these ventricles are increasing, and you see that there is these ventricles are increasing, and you see also the brain shrinking, right? If you think of brains, all these folds, you think of them having more space in there. And this extra shrinking, you know, especially in these temporal lobe areas, really affect memory, right? And ability to regulate emotions and just general planning. And Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause, right? Of death in the United States, and 1 out of 3 seniors will die eventually of some type of Alzheimer's or related dementias, right? This is the ADRD, right? Related dementias, because we think it's a lot of these deaths have been caused by Alzheimer's, and we don't really know. But so that's why we say related dementias, because there's multiple paths to dementias, these cognitive functionings. And Alzheimer's disease especially is related, it's going to be a bigger issue as we see more and more of the population age, you know, and grow. More people will start to experience Alzheimer's disease or related dementias. And this is disproportionately affecting people of color, right? Older adults, African Americans, and Latinx older adults disproportionately. And there's many issues about that because it could be the genes. It's not, there's actually genes. There's no real evidence that is the genes, you know? And we think that it might be because of potentially the environmental factors, or these behavioral factors. And we know these are related to each other, right? If you grow up in a more underserved area, poorer area, right? There are food deserts out there that don't promote like healthy behavior because there's a lack of access to healthy foods, and there's all these things that happen with environment and behavior that might drive these racial differences, the disproportionate racial differences, and we'll get into that more in the interventions part of the course. But we know that there's just so much money now getting thrown at addressing this issue now, right? Especially Bill Gates throwing 400 milli, right? Just throwing that, making it rain to address this issue, because it's going to be a large issue as this population ages. And like we talked about a little bit before, right? This is one of the worst diseases because it erodes the personhood, you know? People start to forget who they are and their memory. So they literally, what you guys saw in the notebook, right? You forget your loved ones, you know, you even forget your daughter sometimes, or your children, your offspring. So this is why there's such a big push for that, because it affects so many people and it's about to affect a lot more, and we still don't know so much about it. So we highlight that the body declines with age, right? And the functioning of the mind and the brain, right, declining with age. However, there's this paradox, you know, of aging, because despite all these cognitive and physical declines, happiness, right, this subjective well-being continues to remain steady or even increase compared to these different, compared to age. You know, you would expect if the declining mind and the declining body, right, really deters a lot of this activity, but happiness levels, right, they still remain or increase with age. Hence why this paradox of aging, and we'll get a little more into this paradox of aging, but it's just really fascinating at the psychological level, right? People are resilient and adapt, you know, to even come into terms with being more happier than they were in earlier life. So we'll get a little more into this paradox of aging, especially in the midlife, where you start to see it dip really, really low. Gulp.
This ends now!
Holy moly. We went through such a lot, right? In terms of why the body and mind decline with age. And there's so many, that's what we first think about, you know, when we think about aging, right? The declining body and mind, and how, as an anti-aging society, how do we prevent that? You know, how do we push that back? But as we know, right, there are many theories to explain why, these biological theories about wear and tear, it's genetically programmed in you. But we try to capitalize on this, especially with this new science of understanding the aging process and editing these genes. And that's something going to be really exciting to see down the road to promote further functioning in life. I didn't intro. Further functioning in life, because I guess it's good and bad, right? A lot of this aging society is focused on just looks, but it goes beyond looks, right? And as we know, that these functional and cognitive declines. But we know that diet and exercise are really the really two proven interventions, right? To slow or improve the aging process, like we talked about, like exercise and caloric restriction, right? Are these really two main things, but we're starting to see more and more genetic interventions with this CRISPR stuff. So there is this natural decline, right, of fluid intelligence with age, and these natural declines are associated with proneness to these age-related disease and disorders such as Alzheimer's disease or related dementias. But there is these resilient things that we can do, right? Because it is part of genetics, it's built-in aging, but also part of it is the environment and our behaviors. These are things that we could intervene on, and especially even that cognitive reserve, right, is really something promising, these promising work on cognitive reserve and enriching environments. And despite all of this decline, right, there are this paradox of aging that we experience, right? Despite declines on the body, despite declines in the mind and brain functioning, we still maintain our happiness psychologically. So it's just such a fascinating experience, this whole aging, you know, aging experience is so fascinating. Hope you find it fascinating as well. And as this field evolves, right, it's going to evolve more and more, this field of gerontology, understanding the biology, the psychology, the cognition, the neuroscience behind it all. It's going to get more and more murky in terms of when do we want to edit and prolong aging for such a long time, you know, because the resources are limited in this world. So there's a ton of issues that this editing and gene stuff of anti-aging really presents itself, and you'll see more and more of it in the future, along with the promising things of a cure for Alzheimer's disease or related dementias. Wow, that was a lot. I said schmoly before, but that was just a lot. And I want you to leverage this information, right, to be able to understand what is happening to the body and mind of not just yourself, but also your loved ones, and how that really, this information, you know, you could really detect what is normal versus not normal, and how you can potentially intervene earlier in the life course or the lifespan about it. So thank you all for joining me to understanding the declining body and brain and mind. And like always, I will see you next time.
Chicken wing, hot dog and bologna, chicken and macaroni, chilling with my homies. Chicken wing, hot dog and bologna, chicken and macaroni, chilling with my homies. Chicken wing, hot dog and bologna, chicken and macaroni, chilling with my homies.
Hey yo, homie, does this bass hit different, or is it just me?